Hey guys, Steve Lav here. On this one, I talk about boiler controls and the importance of having, priority in case you have a storage tank or a tankless heater. You have to have priority on the domestic water. If not, there'll be issues. And I go over different controls, controls that have a high and a low setting, high and low limit, cold start controls. I go over some Takeo um, zone controls, either for zone valves or for circulators. They're great little controls. If you got 5 zones, you can get a 5 zone control and take the circulator right out of the operating control and just use these controls. And you got a priority. If it's a 5 zone, number 5 would be priority. You put a little switch on there. You put that 5th zone to the storage tank. When the storage tank calls for hot water, all the other circulators shut right off. The boiler can heat up, the water to supply the storage tank, so your wife don't run out of hot water when she's taking a bath. It's important. And I go over that on this, and I talk about a couple of different things. I'm going to go over the controls in detail, each one in another setup. Different controls for oil, different controls for gas. This is kind of like an overview of the different controls, and I basically trying to push the reason for priority and the reverse and this and that. It's important, guys. So like on this hydronic series, it's for the basic beginners. So I don't want to get too technical with stuff and have these videos really long. So it's like hydronic for dummies. You know, maybe I should watch it. All right, guys. Hopefully you enjoy it.
All right, guys. On this one, I'm going to talk about controls and zoning. Main operating controls on boilers, basically. So you either have gas or oil-fired boilers. We're going to talk about oil-fired boilers right now. And then we'll go over the gas. But I'm going to kind of do them. The only difference between gas and oil, this control right here, okay, would have a low limit and a high limit. Now, if this was oil, it would be feeding 110 to the burner. If it was gas, it'd be feeding 24 volts to the burner. That's the only difference between the controls. Okay, that would be this type of control right here. Okay, if it was an A or a C control, it would be oil. If it was an E control, it would be gas. And that would be the only difference. So you could take an oil burner control like this and put a step-down transformer and feed the burner with that. Would be no problem. Now, the only reason why you'd want a low limit on a burner control, this is the main operating control for a boiler. The low limit would shut the circulator off, so you could use priority on a domestic water zone for either stored water or a tankless heater. That was the only reason why you'd need the low limit. So in other words, when this thing was below whatever that low limit set off, the circulator would shut off. Okay, pretty basic. Now this control here is the same. It's what they call a cold start for a cold start boiler, either oil or gas. And the difference again, the oil would be fed with 110 to the burner, and if it was gas, you'd be feeding 24 volts to the burner. And some of these controls would have a Molex plug down the bottom over here for a vent damper. Now with gas, you might have a vent damper like this. That's basically just shuts off after the boiler's done working to keep the heat in the boiler. It'd be in a vertical position like this as a vent damper on some of the newer gas stuff. That's all 80 plus furnaces. On the high efficiency stuff, that's a whole different ball game. So this vent damper, if this was gas, okay, you'd have a little Molex plug in here that you plugged a cable into that ran up to that vent damper. So if this is oil, basically what's going to happen for when you get a call for heat, it's going to heat up and run to high limit. It's just got a high limit. This one's got the high limit and also the low limit. So on a boiler like this, a cold start boiler, if you had a storage tank, okay, I'm going to go over some other Takeo zone valves that you could use in conjunction with this to have a priority. If you wanted a priority, you only had one circulator. This would be the control to go with. Okay. Now also on this control here, on that control there's CZZR in this control. And that will also be on the reverse. That's CZ the C, the ZC, and ZR. Okay, the CZ is on the same circuit as this low limit. So that ZC, you could use that to feed multiple controls, other zones that would shut off on the low limit side. And the only thing the ZR does is you send power to that, and then back will fire up the burner on that ZR, on that control. So what that does is, if, say you got this control and you're using it, and you got like 3 other circulators, you could feed them other circulator controls through that circuit there. Okay, this one was shut off with the circulator, but this one, after the low limit gets satisfied, this one would fire the burner up with a 110 circuit. Okay. Well, that's the only difference with that control. That's a good control. Now I'm going to go over some other controls. There's some other controls that they got out now, these smart controls, Aqua Smarts, on the gas and the oil. Again, oil would just be 110, gas would be 24 volts. These have a little probe in there that you have to make sure the probe's in all the way. This one's got a little, it almost looks like a phone plug, like you'd plug a phone in. Then there's a little flexible cable that you have to make sure is inside the well all the way. I've had a lot of problems with these if they're not pushed in all the way. And they say on these controls you want to add an extra ground to them, because the ground's a problem on some of these. I've had some problems with these controls. And actually the well is plastic, it's not even brass. Yeah, right here. They say you want to add this extra ground clamp, and that goes over to B, I believe. The ground on this control is B. You have to, they say to put that extra ground clamp. And if you look at this, now this well is all plastic. Years ago they were all brass, but not this piece of shit. It's all plastic. I've had problems with these. What happens is it says it's on low water, and that probe's not in all the way. It's a plastic probe right there. That thing's going to be pushed in all the way. Piece of junk. Aqua Smart my ass. They also have this type of control here, which is the new style control. You have to push all three buttons down to program it. Now they got these that maintain temperature, and they got these that are also cold smart. And this has got the Z, C, and ZR in it also. So it depends on, you know, what you want to do as far as application is going to determine on you know, what control you use and how you wire it. Now you always need priority on a storage tank zone. A storage tank is for domestic water. You always want to have that on priority. So when you get a call for hot water for your showers, all the circulators shut off. You don't want, you know, on a cold day, you got a call for domestic water, and if you don't have this set up right, you got 3 zones in the house calling for the same time the domestic hot water is calling. You might not get enough hot water to feed that domestic hot water for your shower. So that's why you got to have these things on the reverse and unwired properly, so the domestic water is always on priority. Now I'm going to show you another control that's very good for working with priority. Alright, Taco's got a nice line of zone controls. Now you can either get this zone control for circulators or for zone valves. And what's good about this is, say you got a 5-zone control and you got 5 circulators in a house, okay? Say this is a 5 zone. The 5th zone would be on priority. There's a little switch in here, okay? There's a little switch right there. You'd switch that. And you'd put that 5th zone, which would be your domestic water, okay? So now, any other of them other 4 zones are calling, as long as the priority zone is met, them other 4 zones would run and the boiler would heat up and fire up. As soon as that zone for the domestic water calls, all them other ones would go into reverse and not run until that one zone gets satisfied. And you just use your main operating control for the high limit, and you'd run all your circulators and stuff off these you know, off this control. Now you can get these for 1 zone, 2 zone, 3 zones, up to 20 zones you can go, I believe. They had said in this, up to 20 zones. You know, I think they go up to like 5 or 6 on each one. But there's different kinds, you know. This is you know, nice little setups. There's little fuses in here. There's little fuses you can change out. There's little relays that you can, you know, plug in. They're very nice. I like this, a Taco. Very, very nice for switching relays. You know, say I had like 2 or 3 zones on a heating system. You know what? Get one of these controls and just use that main operating control, just strictly high limit, and everything will go off of this. And you got your priority zones if you need it. If you don't need priority zones, you don't need to do this. But it's just another option you have. Now, this one here is strictly for zone valves, you see? Works with zone valves. 2, 3, or 4 wire zone valves. So this one here is strictly for zone valves. So you got one that's strictly for zone valves or one's for circulators. Depends on how you got your system set up is what you're going to use. Very nice. Very nice controls. You could do a lot with this stuff. Okay, on the vent dampers, it'd be strictly gas. And how this works is for a call for heat, okay? For call for heat, it'd send power down here. It'd be a coal start boiler on a gas boiler on something like this. Your circulator would kick on. Then this zone damper would open slowly. When this thing opened all the way, there's an end switch in there. It'd send power back down to fire up the burner. So for some reason, if this thing is not opening all the way, sometimes these things go bad. You could just grab it and turn it by hand. And if the boiler fires when the circulator is running, you know this vent damper is bad. I change a lot of these. But it's like on a furnace, you know, you got a call for heat on a furnace. The exhaust fan motor starts up. It proves the vacuum switch, and then it goes through a cycle. This is the same thing with the gas boilers.